Malcolm Gladwell is here. He is a staff writer for the New Yorker magazine. His first two books, The Tipping Point and Blink, each sold well over 2 million copies in the United States. His unique take on the world ultimately has even spawned its own term, Gladwellian. His new book is called Outliers, The Story of Success. I am very pleased to have him back at this table. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, tell me, I said to you as you sat down, I am fascinated by performance and success in terms of the essence of it. And how do you get there? Not that there's a magic formula, but what can we understand about it?
Yeah. No, it's this sort of perennially interesting question. And there are so many different answers depending on who you ask and when you ask them. And that's why we keep returning to it. If it was some little simple algorithm we could apply, it wouldn't capture our imagination in the same way.
It is said that part of the reason for this book, and there is some personal biography here, you talk about your grandmother, was that you were in search of explaining your own success, this phenomenal success you've had.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a conscious attempt. I would never do something so explicitly autobiographically, consciously. But I suppose on some level, I mean, that question began to occur to me because my own success doesn't seem to me to be entirely rational, or it certainly wasn't anything I would have expected.
And you couldn't necessarily look at particular biographical points and say, aha, this guy is going to be either president or write bestsellers.
Yeah, it seemed that I got really lucky. I mean, luck is a huge theme in this book. And it's funny, we're not very good with luck. We either, we tend to sort of discount it. We'd always rather give a kind of considered explanation for something than just to say it's happenstance. But you know what? A lot of the time it really is. And I try and, in the book I try and sort of zero in on what is exactly the nature of the lucky break that characterizes so much of truly outstanding success.
Okay, let's take an easy example that you use. Bill Gates.
Yeah, so Bill Gates is lucky in many ways.
Yeah, very bright.
He starts two ways in particular. One is that when he walks into 8th grade at Lakeside Academy in Seattle in 1968, there is a computer terminal sitting there with a link into a mainframe in downtown Seattle. No one had access to a computer terminal in 8th grade or 9th grade or 10th grade or even college in 1968.
Anywhere else in the world.
No, and he himself told me, he's like, if there were 50 people in my position in 1968, I'd be stunned. And he basically spends his entire teenage years programming, right? Because of this gift. And he would tell me at one point, Paul Allen, his great high school buddy, with whom he co-founds Microsoft, discovers there's a mainframe down at University of Washington that's free. It's not being used between 2 and 6 in the morning. So he goes to bed at 10 o'clock, sets the alarm clock, climbs out the window, whatever, at 1:30 in the morning, walks 2 miles to the University of Washington, and programs from 2 till 6. Now I love that story because it's the two parts of his success are right there. One is the extraordinary desire and obsessiveness and determination and love of computing, but the other is the fact that he's a guy who lives 2 miles from a mainframe in 1973 that's free between 2 and 6 in the morning, right? Now, lots of people may have the first thing. Almost no one has the second thing, right? I could have walked for a month and not come onto a mainframe.
But this is central to what you were saying here, and so let's explore it in more. The Beatles.
Yeah. Same thing. So Beatles, I'm really interested in one of the other themes I come back to in the book is this notion of how long does it take to be good at something?
Exactly.
And psychologists who have looked at this in the expertise literature have said, you know what, if you look at a whole range of cognitively complex activities, time and time again we see that expertise is reached only after a minimum of 10,000 hours of practice. And that roughly translates to 10 years of doing something. And I do this actually now with anyone who's good at something, and I could do it with you right now. I just ask people, all right, in your career, what was the point that you started to feel comfortable in your role? And it's always 10 years. It's always 10 years. And I'm sure if we did the math with you right now, it would come out to...
No, you're right.
And so this magic number of 10,000 hours, what that says is the first in a cohort to reach 10,000 hours has a huge advantage. So Gates having that computer down the street, or that computer in 8th grade, gives him his 10,000 hours before anyone else who was that age. The Beatles, before they come to America, get invited to go to Hamburg. They're still teenagers, and they become a house band in a strip club, and they play 8-hour sets 7 days a week for months at a time. They get their 10,000 hours in before the British invasion, right? That's why they're good. I mean, it's not the only reason, but absent that kind of intensive grad school in rock and roll, they're not the band that we think they are, and they don't make that splash when they come to America.
And I assume that you could look at people who have been great athletes where there's a demand for performance at a young age and discover that they started practicing under very good circumstances very early. Tiger Woods would be Exhibit 1.
Would be Exhibit 1. And the key, what you just said is key. When you said under very good circumstances, this is not just Michael Jordan going out and shooting baskets. The term that expertise researchers use is deliberate practice. That is to say, focused, intensive practice with an eye to zeroing in on your failures and addressing them, your weaknesses. And I'm sure, I would love to have a camera on Michael Jordan as a 16-year-old as he plays basketball, and seeing, because I am convinced that that's what sets him apart, that when he practiced in a different way, and that he was constantly thinking about what am I not doing well, and why am I not doing it well, and what can I do to perfect it.
Because, he didn't make his team as a 14-year-old or something. The junior high team didn't make it, and then became a star and got a scholarship to University of North Carolina.
What's interesting, just to talk about Michael Jordan for a second, unlike a lot of other basketball players, his game changes dramatically over the course of his professional career. And he's not a great outside shooter when he starts, and has a, devastating jump shot by the time he retires. So he never stopped this kind of constant process.
He added to his arsenal, and once he became a pro even. There've been lots of examples of that. People that had a certain kind of college career, and then they found out once they got to be a pro that they needed to add to it. But what do we read into this? We read in this access to deliberate practice over 10,000 times.
Yes.
May give you the opportunity for success. The opportunity.
Yeah. Yes. And that's a big thing, because, ultimately this book ends up with a series of kind of policy prescriptions, because it's supposed to be a way of thinking about this question of how do we help people achieve their potential, right? And there's all kinds of ways to do that. And the very simple answer from the book is you give them opportunities to work harder. And so I end with the book, for example, with a chapter about the KIPP academies in this new breed of charter school, which is really based on this idea. There's nothing fancy about what they do. What they do is extend the school day, extend the school year into the summer, have school start at 7 and go until 6 at night, and have them come in on Saturday. And for kids who want to work harder, they will give you that opportunity. And the insight is that kids who want to work hard can't work hard unless there's a school there to do it.
That's true too, but what separates the kids who want to work hard from those that don't?
I have one of the chapters in the book is about Jewish lawyers.
Yes, exactly. It's wonderful.
And it's all about this group of men who rise from the Bronx in Brooklyn, children of immigrants from Europe, grew up, parents in the garment industry, grew up in the tenements.
In the 1930s.
In the 30s and 40s, and end up at the top of the legal profession in New York. Now, this is what this is hunger, right? So, and one of the central ideas in that chapter is this notion that it was because they were discriminated against as Jews coming out of law school, and as a result, forbidden to work at the big downtown law firms, that they went out on their own and took up this unfashionable area of corporate law called takeovers, and practiced it in isolation and obscurity for 20 years, and then
all of a sudden it became a big deal.
And they were at the top of the game.
And they were prepared.
But
preparation meets opportunity.
That's slight, though, at the beginning. The big, fancy, waspy law firm telling these kids named, Greenberg or Flom or what have you, that you can't work here.
And we don't care what your grades were at Harvard.
And we don't care what or in their case, NYU.
Yeah, right.
But we don't care. That, that slight is of incalculable importance. I mean, you just said that Jordan doesn't make his team when
he was 14.
When he's 14, right? Again, that slight is I think that is the kind of added psychological
But do you
ingredient.
have that gene in you?
Did I have it? I don't think I've ever had a slight, but I'm not.
Not a slight. I mean, I don't think it has to be born of a slight.
No,
I mean, I
no.
think it can come from, and that's the intriguing question. Now, I just saw Rolling Stone. I mean, Rolling Stone has got a list of the 25 greatest singers. Okay, and including John Lennon.
Yeah.
Now, talent had something to do with this.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
where do we put that?
Obviously it's there. What's fascinating to me is in the psychological literature on expertise, there are a whole group of psychologists for whom I have an infinite amount of respect, who will stand up and with a straight face say that talent doesn't exist, that it's all application and effort. Now, I don't know if I'm willing to go that far, but what that tells me is, look, we think it's this much, and it's not. It's this much, it's some tiny fraction of what we think it is.
I believe that because I'm being fascinated by the subject of talent and performance and what makes people the way they are. I have, in the history of doing this, more than 30 years, this show, 18 years, I have never had somebody say to me, the reason I'm so good at what I do is because I'm smarter than everybody else.
Yeah.
It is all because I wanted it more, I worked harder, I focused more, I sacrificed more, and more importantly, I had a deep passion for the thing.
Yeah.
Whether it was swinging a golf ball, hitting a basketball, doing scientific research, being a diplomat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they never lose it.
Yeah.
And it is their best friend, their very best friend. Everything else takes, and then you get into work balance and all that stuff. Am I right?
Yeah. No, when I think about the story of the Beatles, what's fascinating about them, of course, is that they went to Hamburg in the 50s and were a house band for a strip club. Do we have any idea how miserable that must have been? 8-hour sets. You must really, truly love rock and roll if you're willing to play as a house band in a Hamburgian strip club. I mean, it's like the nastiest situation.
You're willing to take the sacrifices necessary to get there.
Yeah.
So what do we know about Barack Obama? I mean, here's a man who's had phenomenal success. He's at the epitome of power in the world.
Yeah. Well, there's two parts of Barack Obama that fascinate me. The second half of my book is all about culture, but the role that culture plays in success, and how different cultures have very, very different strengths in different. And so I spend a lot of time contrasting Asian and Western cultures, for example, and talking about how Asians kids are better at mathematics for cultural reasons, that there's something about their culture that's beautifully suited to the test.
Okay, well, this is intriguing. So, I mean, tell us what it has to do with.
Well, I think it has to do. So we make this observation that there's a huge difference in the performance of Asian kids and Western kids on math tests, right? And we know it's not. We've refuted the genetic argument. They're not genetically better at it. And we also know that from a series of psychological tests that they work harder, and that's the key. They're just simply willing to persevere more. The application of effort is greater. So why? And I have this whole chapter, which is, I think it has to do with patterns of agricultural practice going back hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Having to do with rice.
Rice. My father's European peasant ancestors, who were, in the wheat fields of northern England, probably worked 1,000 hours a year and had lots of holidays and were drunk most of the winter and sleeping and worked till noon every day, right? Their Chinese counterparts in that same period were working 3,000 hours a year, weren't drinking off the afternoons, and weren't sleeping through the winter. They were putting in a second crop of rice. Rice cultures are renowned for the fact that rice is infinitely more labor-intensive than traditional Western agriculture. And I think that if a culture engages in that kind of intensive work for 1,500 years, it doesn't go away. And so you take that child who is the product of that kind of culture.
It makes you good at math.
You sit that child down in front of a calculus problem, and they're going to approach it differently. And some people laugh when I give this theory, but here's the thing: no one has a better theory, right? We don't have any other explanations.
I know.
And the difference between Asian and Western performance is not this much; it's this much. It's enormous, right?
I mean, that's always a very good question and a good argument. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. What's the better idea? And nobody says.
Someone's got to give you a better idea.
Okay.